fighting for. We got to end this war. We should love one another. Oh, can we just pretend this war never began? We can try, brother, my brother.
Let's go!
It's often said that your brother is your first friend and your first enemy. And when it comes to these two, enemies is a far more fitting description. Carlos has always had a deep down hatred for his brother Devon. He was the younger brother and kind of the black sheep of the family, no pun intended. He barely knows how to duel as well as socially interact. In fact, if there's only one thing he had the advantage on Devon on, it was how to run his mouth. Devon is more neutral. He was the #1 student at Eclipse Duel Academy and became one of the best duelists of all time. Unfortunately, absolute power corrupts absolutely. See, he doesn't care if Carlos and him work together or fight against each other. As long as people are suffering and chaos is being sown, he's happy. And before you call him a Zark clone, this series came out well before R.O.T.S.O.O, and he and Zark have key differences. Zark went crazy because the audience cheered the more violent he got. He did it to make people happy. Devon, however, went crazy on his own and doesn't care how violent or cruel he is, as long as he's happy. Now these two have 2 on-screen duels against each other, and we will be breaking both of them down, as well as ask the questions. Could Carlos have won either of them? Was Devon just straight up the better brother? Will these two have a better brother versus brother match than Jimmy versus Jay at WrestleMania 40? There's only one way to find out. Let's quit our stalling and get brawling. The duel begins and Carlos decides to go first. He draws and his opening hand consists of Dark Android Soldier, Sakuratsu Armor, and 4 mysterious cards, which are never seen or used, and all we know is that they can't be Dark Android monsters unless Carlos is misplaying, which is entirely possible. But we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that they are Machine Duplication, Monster Reborn, Dark Android Combination, and Cyber fucking Dragon. He begins by normal summoning his Dark Android Soldier in attack mode. And when Soldier is summoned, he can summon another Dark Android monster from his hand, but he doesn't have one in his hand, so that effect is useless. He sets Sakuratsu Armor face down and ends his turn. Devon tells Carlos that opening was pathetic, which he isn't wrong about, and hoped Travis would have trained him a bit better than that. Carlos goes on a long rant about how Travis never really trained him, just showed off to him, and says the only true power is in darkness. And since this episode predates The Dark Knight Rises, Devon can't make the Bane reference. Instead, goes back to the duel. It's Devon's turn. He draws and his opening hand consists of 2 copies of Ancient Rules, 3 copies of Time Pendulum, and 1 Pot of Greed. Devon begins by activating 2 copies of Ancient Rules. Ancient Rules lets him special summon a level 5 or higher monster from his hand as long as it's a normal monster. He special summons his 2 level 8, 3000 attack points Time Pendulums in attack mode. Technically activating 2 cards back to back like that is illegal, but it speeds things up here and he's just summoning vanilla bead sticks, so let it slide. Carlos is flabbergasted by these new monsters. As Devon activates Pot of Greed, he draws Trade-In and Monster Reborn. Weird to wait to activate Pot of Greed, but it's not a misplay, just weird. He then activates Trade-In, discarding his 3rd Time Pendulum to draw 2 cards, which are Mystical Space Typhoon and an Unknown card, which we'll just say it's his 3rd Ancient Rules, why not? Carlos asks why Devon is drawing so many cards, only for Devon to ask,
Do you think training for just a mere week was enough to defeat me?
Devon activates Monster Reborn to revive his 3rd Time Pendulum. Finally, Devon activates Mystical Space Typhoon to destroy Carlos' Sakuratsu Armor. Carlos takes it all well.
My trap cards! It's in ruins, you see!
Devon tells Carlos to cry him a river and moves into his battle phase. He attacks with all 3 of his Time Pendulums, winning the duel, torturing the entire arena of spectators, and feasting on their screams before teleporting out. So could Carlos have defeated Devon? Maybe if we know what those 4 cards in his hand were, but without that info, no, straight up, no way. Carlos had a brick hand and played like it was GOAT format. Meanwhile, Devon got a God hand and played like he was playing Tengu Plant format. Hate him all you want, Carlos, but your brother was right. You had 1 week of training and thought you could take on the best in the world. And sadly, real life is not a shonen anime. But enough about this duel. Let's move on to the duel people actually give a crap about. It's been years in the making. and with much more experience and training under his belt, and with an ancient prophecy told to him from his forefathers backing him up, Carlos believes he is now destined to defeat Devon, whom has become so empowered with the darkness of the Shadow Realm that it's even consumed his face. They meet face to face, and Devon reveals that he was the one to free Zashin, the main antagonist of the arc, whom is never brought up again after this arc, because even in fan shows, we aren't spared from filler arcs. He also reveals that Zashin is his and Carlos's father. Can Carlos fulfill the prophecy and stop this cycle of rage and hatred? Or will it turn out that his forefathers are more like the type of fathers to go out and get the milk and never come back? There's only one way to find out. You know the rest. The duel begins and Devon goes first. He draws and his opening hand consists of Kron Warrior, Kron Beacon, Kron Frequency, Kron Defends, Kron Butterfly Effect, and Kron Counter Summon. He summons his Kron Warrior in attack position. Next he activates the spell card Kron Beacon. This spell lets him target a Kron monster he controls, Warrior in this case, and summon as many monsters that share that card's name from his deck. So he summons 2 more Kron Warriors in attack mode. Devon then sets Kron Frequency and Kron Defense face down and ends his turn. It's Carlos' turn. He draws and his opening hand consists of Dark Android Soldier, Dark Android Boltman, Dark Android Knight, Dark Android Tactics, Dark Android Combination, and an unknown card. This card will only exist as tribute fodder for later for a sacrifice, but the worst part is I can't even narrow it down if it's a spell, trap, or monster card because of what Carlos does later, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, Carlos opens the same way he did in their last duel. He summons Dark Android Soldier, but he used its effect this time. Since it was summoned, Carlos can special summon another Dark Android monster from his hand. Devon chains, activating his face-down trap card, Kron Frequency. When Carlos activates a spell, trap, or monster effect while Devon controls a face-up Kron or Time Pendulum monster, this card can negate and destroy that effect. Carlos has a chain of his own though. He activates the effect of Dark Android Boltman from his hand. When the opponent activates a trap card, he can special summon his Boltman from his hand, then negate and destroy that trap card. So Boltman is summoned and Frequency is negated and destroyed. Then Soldier's effect resolved. He special summons Dark Android Knight in attack mode. Carlos then uses his Knight's effect by attributing 1 Dark Android monster he controls, in this case Boltman. Knight can attack all monsters the opponent controls. Carlos enters his battle phase and orders Knight to attack the Kron Warriors. Sadly, Devon activates his trap card, Kron Defense. When the opponent declares an attack, while he controls a Kron or Time Pendulum monster, he can negate that attack and end the battle phase. Aggravated by Devon's fucking of his plans, his words not mine, Carlos sets Dark Android Tactics and Dark Android Combination face down and ends his turn. It's Devon's turn. He draws and gets Pot of Greed. He activates it, drawing Summoner's Art and Kron Counterbalance. He uses Summoner's Art, letting him add 1 level 5 or higher normal monster from his deck to his hand. He adds Time Pendulum. Next, he activates his continuous spell card, Kron Counter Summon. With it, once per turn, Devon can contribute 1 Kron monster he controls to special summon a Time Pendulum monster from his hand. Devon uses his Counter Summon's effect, attributing his Kron Warrior to special summon Time Pendulum in much higher detail. Also in attack mode. Upon its summoning though, Carlos uses his trap card, Dark Android Tactics. By reducing the attack of a Dark Android monster he controls to 0, he can destroy 1 card Devon controls. He reduces Soldier's attack and targets Time Pendulum. Devon chains though, activating his quick play spell card, Chronic Butterfly Effect. Carlos asks, what's that, some kind of movie? And Devon explains. This card targets 1 Kron or Time Pendulum monster Devon controls and makes that monster unable to be targeted by other card effects. And this is the part where it gets really screwy. Butterfly's effect resolves, but because Tactics still targeted Time Pendulum, Butterfly lets Devon special summon another copy of Time Pendulum from his deck. Which, when I say aloud, does make sense, but written down it's weird because the card prevents targeting, and then the targeting still happens. I guess it's because of the original targeting that happened, which causes Butterfly's second effect to go off at all, playing with the whole time gimmick that this archetype has. But it's just weird. If it just said it couldn't be destroyed by card effects rather than just targeted by card effects, it'd be clear. Just a little bit confusing is all, but let's get back to the duel. Tactics fizzles, and Devon enters his battle phase. He orders 1 of his Time Pendulums to attack Carlos' 0 attack point Dark Android Soldier. Carlos responds by activating his quick play spell card, Dark Android Combination. This lets him fusion summon a Dark Android monster using materials from his hand and or field. He fuses his Soldier and Knight together to fusion summon Dark Android Rampart in defense mode. Since Rampart's defense is too high for any of Devon's monsters, he goes into his second main phase. He sets Kron counterbalance face down and ends his turn. It's Carlos' turn. He draws off screen and gets Mystical Space Typhoon. He uses it and destroys Kron counter summon. And this is where the mystery card comes into effect. Carlos puts the mystery card in his monster card zone. He calls it a he, then uses Rampart's effect, blowing up the mystery card so that Rampart's attack and defense get swapped. Okay, so the only reason I think that this mystery card is a spell or trap is because a version on Dueling Book says it has to be a spell or trap for the effect to go off. And I realize that Dueling Book is not an official source of anything, but it's all I have to go off of. It's the only option that makes sense. So yeah, that whole thing is screwy. Anyway, Carlos switches his now 3300 attack point Rampart to attack mode and orders it to attack one of Devon's time pendulums. Devon then activates his trap card Kron Counterbalance. This prevents Kron and Time Pendulum monsters from being destroyed by battle this turn. Also, if a Kron or Time Pendulum monster battle this turn, Devon can add one copy of Time Pendulum from his deck to his hand. Devon gets his search and takes 300 points of damage. At the end of the battle phase, since Rampart attacked, it switches into defensive mode. But luckily, its stats also switch back as well. Carlos ends his turn. It's Devon's turn. He draws and gets Polymerization. He activates it. He fuses the Time Pendulums on his field with a Time Pendulum in his hand to fusion summon
Chronogenesis. Neolith.
Devon enters his battle phase, attacking Rampart with Neolith, destroying it and leaving Carlos wide open. Luckily for Carlos though, one of Neolith's effects is that non-Neolith monsters Devon controls cannot declare an attack. Devon ends his turn. It's Carlos' turn. He draws and gets the anime version of Card of Demise. He activates it, letting him draw until he has 5 cards in his hand, but in 5 turns, he must discard his entire hand. Carlos draws 5 cards, which are Dark Android Core, Droid Rain, Dark Android Waveform, Soul Release, and Return from the Different Dimension. Carlos normal summons his Core. He tries to use this effect to pay half his life point to send it and 1 to 4 Dark Android monsters he controls to the graveyard to special summon a Dark Android Fusion monster from his extra deck, and that special summon monster will be treated as if it were Fusion summoned.
I don't know how he's able to activate the effect, given how he doesn't control any other Dark Android monsters. Is this like Mask Change, where it can distribute itself and then summon a new Fusion monster? Well, this question will never get answered because...
Devon uses one of Neolith's other effects. When the opponent tries to activate a card effect while it's face up, Neolith both negates and banishes that card. So Core is negated and goes bye-bye. Carlos says a lot of Carlos things, then sets Droid Raid and Return from the Different Dimension face down, and ends his turn. It's Devon's turn. He draws off screen and gets a second copy of Kron Counterbalance. Devon attacks directly, attempting to go for game, but Carlos activates Droid Rain, which is basically Dark Android Scapegoat. Devon chains, activating Neolith's effect, negating and banishing Droid Rain. But now that Neolith's effect is used up, Carlos can activate the effect of the Dark Android Waveform in his hand. Since Carlos would receive damage, he can discard this card to the graveyard to make all damage he takes to turn 0 and end the battle phase. Devon is surprised, but not worried. He sets Kron Counterbalance face down and ends his turn. Now I was going to give Carlos a misplay for using Droid Rain as bait and not Waveform, since Droid Rain would give him tokens to protect himself with, but Waveform probably only works during damage calculation, so if he did do it the way I was thinking, Carlos wouldn't be able to activate Droid Rain due to the timing, and would lose the duel. So no misplay Carlos, if anything, misplay me! Your move! It's Carlos' turn. He draws and gets Dark Hole. He activates it to try to get rid of Neolith, but Devon uses Neolith's effect, getting rid of Dark Hole instead. But now that Neolith's effect is used up, Carlos activates his Soul Release, removing all 4 Dark Android monsters in his graveyard from play. Next, Carlos activates Return from a Different Dimension, paying half his life points to special summon all monsters in his banishment. So he special summons Dark Androids Boltman, Soldier, Core, Knight, and Rampart back to the field. Now Carlos uses Core's effect again, paying half his life points and sending all of his Dark Android monsters he controls to the graveyard to pseudo-fusion summon his ace monster, Dark Android Emperor! Follow that up, Carlos cheats. He activates Pot of Greed. How is it cheating? Simple. That card wasn't in his hand. Let me break it down. See, he started with 6 cards in his hand. -1 for summoning Soldier, -1 for summoning Boltman, -1 for summoning Knight, -2 for setting Tactics and Combination, +1 for drawing, -1 for using MST, -1 for setting whatever the funk that mystery card was, +1 for drawing, -1 for activating Card of Demise, but +5 when Demise resolves, -1 for summoning Core, -2 for setting Droid Raid and Return for a Different Dimension, -1 for discarding Waveform, +1 for drawing, -1 for using Dark Hole, -1 for using Soul Release, so he has an empty hand, yet he has Pot of Greed. But hey, it's fine. It just means he learned well from his master Travis in the art of cheating. That was a joke, please do not sue me. Anyway, Carlos uses Pot of Greed, so he draws Dark Android Emperor's Cloak and Legacy of the Forefathers. He then activates the equip spell Dark Android Emperor's Cloak, and equips it onto his Dark Android Emperor. This card can, obviously, only be equipped to Dark Android Emperor, and gives it an extra 1,000 attack points, as well as making it immune to the opponent's spell cards. Carlos orders Emperor to attack Neolith, but Devon reveals another one of Neolith's effects. Once per turn, he can negate an opponent's attack. He tries to use it to negate Emperor's attack, but Carlos reveals another one of Cloak's effects. Once per turn, if a card effect is activated that would affect the equipped monster, that card effect is negating, meaning the Emperor's attack continues.
Devon acts fast though and reveals his face down card, his second Kron counterbalance.
So Neolith isn't destroyed, but Devon still takes 1,000 points of damage. Carlos begs his brother to come back to him, but Devon says he wouldn't dream of it. Being the champion and dominating the competition for so long has made him feel so bored and numb. This duel with Carlos, though, is different. It's pushing him to its limits. It's making him actually work for victory. And that'll make the victory taste all the sweeter when he's feasting on Carlos' screams after he wins this duel. Carlos says he's getting real tired of all this fighting with family. He sets Legacy of the Forefathers face down and ends his turn. It's Devon's turn. He draws and gets the quick play spell card, R.O.T.S.O.O Gate. He activates it.
Carlos tells Devon that Cloak makes Emperor immune to the opponent's spell cards.
But Devon says that that's fine, because he was planning on using it on his own monsters. You see, R.O.T.S.O.O Gate sends a monster Devon controls to the graveyard. Then he special summons one R.O.T.S.O.O Lord type monster from his hand, deck, graveyard, extra deck, or his banishment. That includes the sent monster's name in its text. Or in other words, he sends Neolith to the graveyard to special summon his pseudo-god card,
Kron Progenitor, Abyssus Lord, Neolith.
R.O.T.S.O.O Lord's effect automatically activates upon summon.
Once it's summoned, all other monsters in the field are banished. But Carlos decides to fight an evolved form with an evolved form. He changed with his quick play spell card, Legacy of the Forefathers. This lets Carlos tribute a monster he controls to special summon from his hand, deck, or graveyard one monster with Ascended in its name. He tributes Dark Android Emperor, which destroys Cloak in the process, to special summon Dark Android Emperor 7C. Anyway, R.O.T.S.O.O Lord's effect is still happening, so the Kron Warriors are banished, and Ascendancy is next, but Carlos reveals that Ascendancy is unaffected by all other card effects. Since both their monsters are divine attributes and are unaffected by card effects, Devon has R.O.T.S.O.O Lord attack Ascendancy. Both monsters destroy each other in a huge burst of light. Thinking that both of them are starting fresh and blinded by the power of darkness, Devon ends his turn there, only for Carlos to reveal Ascendancy's other effect kicked in. When it's destroyed, Carlos can special summon the original Dark Android Emperor from his graveyard, which he does! Devon isn't worried though, because Emperor's attack is halved when it's attacking directly, so he'll survive with 700 life points left. It's Carlos' turn, and the penultimate turn of the duel. He draws off screen and gets an unknown card, Dark Android Tedio Max. Doesn't matter anyway, because
Carlos activates the effect of the Cloak in his graveyard.
by banishing it and discarding his Tedio Max to the graveyard, he can add a spell card from his graveyard to his hand. He adds back Legacy of the Forefathers. Devon can't believe that he's actually going to lose, as Carlos activates Legacy to bring back Ascendancy. Carlos attacks directly, attempting to go for game, but Devon decides that if Carlos can only beat him by cheating, then he'll cheat back. That way, the fighting is fair, as he activates a card effect from his hand that wasn't there a moment ago. Just take my word on this one, a hand breakdown now would ruin the pacing. Devon activates World Paradigm Shift. Since he was attacked directly by an attack that would reduce his life points to 0, he can discard this card to pay half his life points and then special summon all monsters that were on the field at the start of the last battle phase. They can send all monsters Carlos controls to the graveyard and replace them with the same number of cards he sent. Carlos said that's impossible because Ascendancy is unaffected by their card effects. But Devon reveals that Paradigm Shift ignores all cards that would be unaffected, so R.O.T.S.O.O Lord returns and Ascendancy is sent away. And just to add insult to injury, Devon replaces it with the original Emperor. In resignation, Carlos puts on his favorite hat and ends his turn. It's Devon's turn, and the final turn of the duel. He draws, it doesn't even matter what he drew. because at the standby phase, Augustus Lord's effect activates. If the opponent doesn't control a divine attribute monster, Devon automatically wins the duel. Since Emperor is dark type, the effect resolves, winning Devon the duel, in the second biggest letdown since Joey vs. Merrick. So could Carlos have won the rematch? I'm sorry to say no. See, the sad fact of the matter is, if Carlos didn't spawn Pot of Greed in his hand, he would have lost.
Without Pot of Greed, Carlos never draws the Dark Android Cloak, which means that he'd most likely attack Neolith with the base form Dark Android Emperor. But
Devon would most likely use a second counter frequency, so Neolith would survive but Emperor would die, and Carlos would be left wide open. But if we say Devon instead uses Neolith's effect to negate the attack, okay, he draws and gets Augustus Gate. He evolves Neolith into Augustus Lord, destroying Emperor, and Carlos is down to 1,000 life points. Now it's Carlos' turn, and tell you what, he top decks Pot of Greed. Fair and square.
during the standby phase, Carlos doesn't control a divine monster, so therefore automatically loses the duel. But let's just say since he controls no monsters, the effect doesn't resolve. What would happen if Carlos was able to activate Pot of Greed?
He's going to top deck Cloak and Legacy, both of which are useless to him without Emperor on the field. The only way he wins is if Devon doesn't spawn World Paradigm Shift into his hand. But as I said, if you cheat against a cheater, aren't you just playing fair at that point? I'll probably break down Devon's hand in the comments section if you want me to prove my work, but for right now, just trust me.
In fact, this is editing James talking, and I realize that there's actually something wrong with the life points in this duel. When Carlos summons Core the first time, he pays half his life points to ultimately do nothing because Neolith's effect activates and negates its effect. But they don't show him paying half his life points. But, you know, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say Neolith negates who doesn't pay the life points. That's not how the ruling works, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, then he activates Return for the River Dimension, so he pays half his life points there. Yes, that's good. Then he activates Core's effect, which again pays half his life points. So he should be down to 1,000 life points. And we know he didn't pay half his life points because when Augustus Lord's instant win condition activates, he still has 2,000 life points in his life gauge. So Augustus Lord's instant win condition isn't even necessary. It's just overkill. He could have just attacked Emperor and it would have been done. This also means that there's no situation where Carlos uses Pot of Greed. At least not fair and square. Because even without the instant win condition, Augustus Lord could just attack Emperor and win the game. And again, if he did lose half his life points we activated Core's effect the first time, despite Neolith negating, he would be down to 500 and still lose, so. My point is that the instant win is ultimately pointless. Although granted, in the end, the life point counter being wrong is pointless because of the instant win condition. So my complaint is that they keep having Carlos pay half his life points, yet the life point counter doesn't show that he paid half his life points 3 times. Although, to be fair to the series itself, Augustus Lord did need some special condition, because otherwise it's got a steep as heck summoning condition, and what does it have to show for it? 5,000 attack points. They gotta add something to it to make it feel more worth it, and I guess an instant win condition does do the job pretty dang well. But I'm just saying there's a life point counter issue. I pointed it out in the Armageddon duel, and I'm pointing it out again here. If I can compliment anything, it's that this series truly did show that Carlos got better with time and improved as a duelist. Meanwhile, Devon showed that he truly was one of the strongest duelists to ever live. Not once did he make a mistake or a misplay or anything like that. He was on top the entire time and showed why he was such a dominant and devastating force.
So in the end, Carlos was always meant to lose. The forefathers were 4 heads, and actors wanting out of a project is always a sad yet understandable thing. Real life takes priority over a funny Yu-Gi-Oh show. Besides, I was probably long overdue for a duel where the villain wins. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to check out Dead Soldier Inc. They made the original Revelations show, as well as the spin-off Duel Arena, and they're still going strong today. Links are in the description. With all that said, I hope you have a good day and a better tomorrow. Bye for now.